Hello, good afternoon. It's always a great joy to come your way once again. All right, so for our lessons today, we will be looking at the different threads that are used in beading, specifically the different sizes of fishing line that are used in beading, or the different thicknesses of fishing lines that are used in beading. So I have with me here a number of fishing lines. We'll go through them and then I'll let you know what I use them for. Okay. Well, I must say that different threads are used in beading. Okay. Some use cotton threads, others use leather thongs, others also use ribbons. But what is in vogue now is the fishing line, which as a personal preference, I also use very often in projects. So I want us to just go through them and then so that you would, depending on what you are going to do, you will know what size of fishing line to use to achieve that project. Okay. So for the fishing lines, we have a number of them. Personally, I use between point 0.25 through to 0.80, depending on what I'm using it for. And for each of these fishing lines, I use them to achieve different projects. So you see, I have here 0.30, 0.35, 0.60, 0.70, and then 0.80. Okay, so depending on what I want to do and what I seek to achieve, I go for a particular fishing line that will help me to achieve I what I want to do. A particular fishing line that will help me to achieve the projects I want to do. Okay, so we'll go through them one after the other, and then we'll know when to use what for what project. The fishing line comes in different sizes or different thicknesses. Okay, so for the fishing line, we have it in different thicknesses or sizes. The fishing line you use for your project will actually depend on what you are doing. So what determines the thickness of the fishing line you should use is based on the type of bead you are using, as in the weight, the size, the hole in the bead, and a whole lot of other factors. So for me, what helps me to determine which or what fishing line to use, the beads I'm using. Am I using seed beads? Then the hole in the bead I'm using, as well as the weight of the bead I'm using. Okay, the weight of the bead I'm using, the type of bead I'm using. So they all determine what kind of fishing line I should go for. So personally, I use between 0.25 mm through to 0.80. Okay, so depending on what I'm doing, that will determine what kind of fishing line I should use to achieve the outlook I want to have. Okay, so when I'm working on bags that I use sugar beads, okay, in a bag like this. Okay, so I use sugar beads to come up with a bag like this. The fishing line I use is 0.80 mm. I can also use 0.70 mm. I personally prefer using 0.80 when I'm working on sugar beads than 0.70. When I use the 0.80, I like how firm, strong the product comes out. Okay, so I usually will go for 0.80. A few times I use 0.70 when I'm working on sugar beets, but I prefer most of the time using 0.80 mm working on sugar beets to produce bags. Again, when I'm working on tissue boxes, I also like using the same 0.80. Okay, I have explained why I like using 0.80. A few times I use 0.70. That's when I don't have 0.80. Okay, so you can use both 7.70 and 0.80 when you are working on projects that will require that you use sugar beets. Okay, projects like the tissue boxes, bags that you will need sugar beets to achieve a firmer outlook. And then when I'm working on fruit holders like this one, what I'm having here, I also, when I'm using sugar beets to work, I always prefer using 0.80 mm. I like the outlook, I like the final product, the firmness and all. So I always go for 0.80. But you can use both, you can use both when you are working on sugar beets. Okay. Then when I'm when I'm working on clashes like this, that will require that I use this kind of bead, also plastic beads. I usually go for 0.60. Okay, so when I'm working on clashes, that I will use these smaller beads. Okay, I usually go for 0.60. So when I'm working on bags like these ones, I also use 0.60. Any products I'm working on that will require that I use these kind of plastic beads, I go for 0.60. Honestly, you can also use 0.50, but I like the firmness. Okay, when I use the 0.60 to work on beads like this, okay, to achieve products like clutches, as in beaded clutches, beaded bags, beaded fruities, like this one. Okay, I like going in for a 0.60 mm. Well, I didn't mention that okay, so for the key holders too, because these are sugar beads, you know what fishing line I'll go for. Obviously 0.80 or 0.70. Okay, right, thank you. Again, and when I'm working on this kind of footies, as in the beaded slippers, okay, what I weave to attach to the slipper itself, when I'm using this size of bead, I use 0.60 or 0.70. I use between the two. Either works perfect for me. Okay, but when I'm sewing it on the as in I'm attaching it, which will obviously have a lesson on, when I'm attaching it to the slipper itself, that one I use a fishing line point 0.40 or 0.45 to attach it to the slipper itself.